is Paul, and I'm an alcoholic. I always like to go to the third tradition, which says the only requirement for membership in AA is a desire to stop drinking. It doesn't say what we drank or how often or what it did to us. It merely says that if we have a desire to stop drinking, while we're eligible for membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the 12th tradition says that we must always remember to place principles above personalities. So if there's anything that I say that you don't like or don't agree with, why, don't blame Alcoholics Anonymous, just blame me, because I'm only going to talk about the way that I work the program and the way that I stay sober. And then I usually tell somebody else's story. But I love the basket cases in AA, the ones that the elders make book on and declare they'll never make it. And I think of one that came into a group with a lot of deacons in it, and they told him to put the cork in the bottle, but it didn't stay in. And so he rode with me for a year to a meeting and was thrown in jail 5 times during that year. And I told him if he'd be out, if he wanted to go, fine. If he didn't want to go, why, forget it. And it's been about 12 years now, and he is now the head of psychology department in one of our universities. So if you're a basket case, don't get nervous. You might end up in the psychology department. I personally don't want any part of it, but that's his deal. I started out in a little town in Iowa. We got a lot of Iowans around here. Dumont, Iowa, to be exact. 698 people. And it'd be a little tough to find a bad influence in Dumont, Iowa. I later became the bad influence in Dumont, Iowa. I started out sniffing gas when I was about 10, and I didn't have too many forerunners, so what happened to me was that I stuck my nose in a can, and I was breathing deeply, and found you get pretty high. We didn't have natural gas. We just had these old gas stoves. If we'd had natural gas, it would have solved a lot of problems a long time ago. But so on the way to school, we had this little 2-gallon gas can sitting right by the door, and so I like to take a few belts and then shut the screen door, and what I liked about it was I liked to hear the spring twinges. It just took such a long time. And in the summertime, why, I carried a little jug of this gas around in my pocket, and I had a rag, and I'd go out on the creek, and I was smoking corn silk and grapevine and willow leaves. I didn't know about that marijuana growing wild. Wasn't too bright, but I was kind of a walking Molotov cocktail, and I didn't know it. What I really like to do is I'd take a few belts of this stuff and then run and dive off the bank, and you just float down and come back up. And I was talking up to Hatchby a few years ago after it became mostly for addicts, and I was talking about this gas, and some guy came up and he says, "I'm on gas now." And I kind of was wondering what it would be like, to have 25 or 30 years experience on that gasoline. But I did see in the police station where they had their layout of all the drugs, and they had a little tube of gasoline. So anyway, my dad made raisin brandy, and he made it in a crock, and I got a quart fruit jar full of it and drank it. And from that time on, I was drunk or on the wagon. I never was a social drinker. I never pretended to be a social drinker. And I figure if you're an alcoholic, you're going to waste a lot of time trying to be social, because you're going to get drunk whether you like it or not. So you just start out to do the way you're going to end up. But I've always kind of felt it was a blessing to be poor, because this makes you periodic whether you like it or not. And so as a As a result of that, I was able to last long enough to get to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got out of school in the middle of the Depression. Really wouldn't make much difference when I got out of school. But anyway, I got a job picking beans at a half-cent a pound. And those string beans don't weigh out too heavy. You win a market sometime and stick a big bunch on the scale and visualize 100 pounds of them. And that's the best I could do, and I had to steal a few to get that. So I was making 50 cents a day. And I couldn't make the nut on 50 cents a day, so I joined what they call a CMTC camp down Des Moines, because they fed you. And as a result of that, I made the ball team, and that's about all we had to do, you know, smell gas and drink wine and play ball in those little towns. But so I ended up joining the 14th Cavalry in Des Moines, Iowa. I may someday be one of the oldest living cavalrymen, horse cavalrymen, because I went in pretty young. But after I'd been in a year, I decided to go overseas. A guy told me that booze was cheap over there, and your money went a long way, so I went to the Philippine Islands. And on the ship going over, I got a lot of fatherly advice, because I didn't shave at that time. And they told me not to drink that gin in the daytime. They said if you drink it in the daytime, you'll get sunshiny. That's kind of a Maybelline look that never goes away. And so, anyway, I waited until payday, and I got me a jug of San Miguel A11A. And I proceeded to become sunshiny. And I came back from the Philippine Islands, locked up in the nut ward, with a disease called neurocirculatory asthenia, which is a big word for being a phony. That was my interpretation, but a friend of mine who was a Navy nurse had that dictionary that they give Navy nurses, whatever it is. So she looked it up, and she said it poor, miserable SOB. So whatever the diagnosis is, I know I got to Letterman General Hospital, and I think I was about 19 at this time, so I'd already qualified. But so any of the young people would say, well, you have been there, you've been there. The big thing is after you get numb, you hang around too long. But I got to Letterman General, and they asked me if I wanted to get out of the Army or go back to duty. And I thought, well, gee, I'm young. I get a pension. I'll go down on the beach. And what I always wanted to do was live on the beach. I'd make wine, chew tobacco, and spit by the people as they went by. Now, this was my philosophy of life, so the philosophy we see of the young today wasn't too much different than my philosophy. And so they said, no, there's no pension involved with this. This is called a Section 8. Well, I didn't know there was going to be a war, so I decided to go back to duty. So I reported into Fort MacArthur down in San Pedro. And the first thing I would do when I'd get to a new outfit was I'd make a reconnaissance. I never reported until I was broke. I never could walk around an Army camp with money. And so I'd go out and find out where the booze was cheapest. Now, I didn't want to be paying 80 cents for a jug if I could get one for 60. I never went in too much for quality. I was more of a quantity operator. And another thing about it is I didn't swish it around my mouth. I just dropped her down where she'd get the job done. So it really didn't make too much difference what it tasted like. So I met a guy in San Pedro, and he'd made a lot of wine. And evidently he didn't have too many winos for friends because it kind of turned to vinegar. And, of course, people that have money aren't going to drink vinegar. But the main thing with me, with booze, was would it get you drunk. So I test it, and then it gets you drunk. Took a little longer and some of that other stuff, but then, you know, you had that numb feeling longer. And so this old red wine, the thing I liked about it is people said that red wine is good for your health. So, you know, I figured, well, as long as I'm going to drink, I might as well drink something healthful. And so what I would do is I'd take a jug of this wine with me on guard. And we had a couple telephones, and we had to call in every 30 minutes and tell them everything is all right. Been all right ever since I'd been there, but you know the Army, they want to be reassured every now and then. And so on this particular night, why, evidently I'd spent more time with the jug than I had in the sack, and I was out there marching in a military manner, and I tripped and went down, and my rifle went down before me and bounced back up and hit me in the head, knocked me out. Well, they weren't getting any messages from the sentry, and so they came out to find him, and they found me face down in the middle of the road. Well, I was pretty lucky. The corporal of the guard was a wino also, and so he jerked my belt, and they threw me in for sleeping on post, which is a case I can beat. And so, drunk on duty, they had me nailed. The charge was just wrong, that's all. So I knew I had a technicality, because when you're a wino in that Army, you better be a guardhouse lawyer along with it, or you're in trouble. So they threw me in, and I waited a couple of days to get rid of the breath, and went over to the doc, and I told him about this neurocirculatory asthenia. And he threw me in the nut ward. Well, all I know about that disease is it's good for psycho anytime you bring it up. So anyway, they couldn't get me on that case. They just didn't have enough evidence. And with my disease and everything, I may not have even been out. Maybe I shouldn't even been out there that night. But anyway. When they want you, they'll get you. And so, especially if you're an alcoholic. So they got me on another charge, and this was only a summary, which, you know, you do 30 days. You broke 5 days after payday in the Army, so what's the difference whether you're in or out? So when I went down to be tried, why, the officer said, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty? And I asked him what the difference was. And he said, well, if you plead guilty, I'll prove you guilty right now, and if you plead not guilty, I'll prove you guilty in a little bit. So I just said guilty, and that was it. And I was a good soldier when I was sober, and I was sober in the guardhouse. So this is about the time the draft. It's like a lot of guys, you know, they say he's a good man when he's sober. And think about alcoholics. With the holidays set up now, you know, a guy could do a lot of drinking without getting in too much trouble. But the trouble with an alcoholic is, on the 4th of July, when everybody else is getting drunk, he's liable to be on the wagon. And then when everybody else is going back to work on the 5th, he gets drunk. That's the problem with alcoholics. They're not too dependable. It isn't that they can't do a good job, because we find that out after they get sober, how many of them do a good job. So when I got out of the guardhouse, why, one of the old first sergeants took me, and the draft was beginning for World War II, and made me a buck sergeant. But so I finished my time, and I got out of the Army in January of 1941 when everybody else was coming in. And I thought, well, you know, they called me 4A, and that meant the only time they get me back is if they went to war, and I still knew there wouldn't be a war. So I figured, you know, I'll burn them up on the outside. Now they're drafting all these dudes. But I never did look at my qualifications. I'm a wino and a bean picker. Now, if you're a smart wino, well, you're going to go where they got wine and beans. And so I went to Iowa in the middle of the winter, and my mother. My mother hadn't seen me in a long time, and so she told me when I first came home, she said, now please don't go downtown and put on a big performance. And of course, that's why I went to Dumont, to go downtown and put on a big performance. So that's what I did. Well, I didn't want to hurt my mother, so I left Iowa, and I came out to California, and I ended up on Skid Row, down on Beacon Street in San Pedro by the Bay. And a friend of mine rescued me, lent me 50 cents to have my picture taken, and enough money to get 2 pair of blue pants and 2 blue shirts and a pair of tennis shoes. And I went to sea as a wiper. And I'm still not sure what a wiper does, but it's not a bad deal for a drunk because there's not much overhead out there. And I remember I'd throw one pair of pants and shirt out the porthole and let them drag for a while and hang them up. And at that time, it was a little hard to get seamen, you know, so they had to take what they could get. And the captain was smarter than I was. He kept me on for quite some time because he would give you enough money, and he just knew that you would get ashore and get drunk enough to remember you still had some money coming back at the ship. And when you go back to the ship, he had you for another port. And that's the way that he held me together. Well, I went around and I finally ended up in Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania, and another guy and I drank the lemon extract going down to Panama, so they wouldn't let us off. And so we were drinking bay rum on the way up to Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania. And we saw a ship under the Panamanian flag. He says, "Get a big bonus flying under the Panamanian flag." He says, "You and I can go on as third assistant engineers." Now, I don't even know what a wiper does, but we figure we can do this. And we never did dig into it too well, so we knew that the captain wouldn't give us our money. So I had a big locker. I didn't have anything in it because I only had two pairs of these little blue clothes, and so I filled it full of cigarettes, and I figured we'll peddle those on the beach and get up to Bayonne, and then we won't have to worry. We'll have it made. And so I still wanted to take a shot at the captain, and so I went to town and had a few drinks because this is a pretty rough captain, and I got pretty rough when I had a few drinks. I mean, never did win, but I got rough. And so anyway, I came back, and the captain didn't disappoint me. He didn't give me my money, so then by that time I didn't want to carry that trunk down, you know, off the ship, so I threw it over the side, threw it over the wrong side into the drink. And so I ended up on Skid Row in Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania. And so then I decided I'd go back to Iowa. And if I'm ever on the bum again, I'm going to go in and ask for medium rare, medium well. I'm going to ask for the best they have. Because I'd go in, you know, and I'd figure, well, they'll feel sorry for him. I'd say, "Do you have any old rolls?" And they all had old rolls. That's just exactly what they had. And that was one lesson. I hope I never have to use it again, but if anybody's planning, that's just a little thing that you can use. Start at the top and let them work down. So anyway, I finally got to Iowa, and along came Pearl Harbor. And so I'd been in the cavalry, and I'd been in the infantry, and I'd been in the artillery, and you don't have to be too bright to know that infantry and cavalry are a bad scene in the war, so I went down and enlisted in the artillery. And they sent me to Texas. And I thought, well, I'm going to stay a private, because I was a pretty sharp private, and I'd been around a long time. And I figured I could maneuver around, you know, and a private doesn't have a bad deal if he knows what's going on. And so I got down there, and they made me a corporal. And I thought, well, now I've got responsibility, and I never was a corporal. The only one made any money was a tailor, because they kept taking those stripes off every payday. And so I decided to become an officer. I'd seen some of these 8-ball officers roaming around, and it's hard on the morale of the men, you know, to be court-martialing the officers. And so I decided if I get to be an officer, why, you know, they'll just transfer me from outfit to outfit. I wasn't kidding myself. And so I went to OCS, and I became a second lieutenant. And because, like I say, I knew about the Army, and I had an edge. I was in there with these guys who've been in 90 days, and I could make that gun pop, you know, on that manual of arms, and boy, I can really shine shoes, I'll tell you that. And if you can make a good bed and shine shoes and kind of holler in a loud, firm voice and count to 4, well, you're in shape. And so, anyway, I got out of OCS, and must have been a bad group, because I graduated #1 in my class. And this kind of messed me up, because I didn't want to buy all those clothes. Man, when they told me that pair of pants was $18, and I figured you ought to buy enough clothes for 10 years for $18. And I was saving that, and I had to rush down and buy a uniform, and this messed up my program, because they only gave you $250, you know, and I figured if I could get by on about $50, I'd have $200 to get drunk on. So anyway, I came out to California. Evidently, I was a born leader, because I got sergeants that should have been colonels, and they knew it, and I knew it, but there wasn't anything we could do about it. And so I just turned their job over to them, and I said, now, the only time I want to see is when you get in trouble. And they knew I was an expert on trouble because I had so much experience with my own. So as a result of this, when it came time to be a first lieutenant, I became a first lieutenant. It came time to be a captain, I became a captain. And when the war was over, I'd been a captain for over 2 years, so they made me a major. And then they wrote me a letter and told me to get with that reserve program or get out, so I got out. Now, I don't know where I'd start from today. Probably couldn't make it sober. But anyway, I went overseas right at the end of that thing in Africa and went in on the invasion of Sicily and staggered through Sicily and went on up into Italy and spent the first winter at Venafro, right below Casino. And in the wintertime, we had the mountains, so we didn't have too much going on. And it seemed like we had the Germans on one side of the mountains getting drunk, and we were on the other side getting drunk, and the Italians were in the middle making it. And so then the next year, we moved up to Bologna, I guess it is. I speak broken Italian. But anyway, by this time I was on grappa, which is what's left after all the good squeezed out of the grapes. But the reason I like that grappa is because it's strong. And you get up in the morning and you take a belt of that, she'd bring you to attention. Wouldn't hold you there too long, but at least it'd get you out. And so I had been on this grappa for a year, and I made quite a sight. I'd shaved my hair off, and there's a lot of olive oil in Italy. And so, you know, it's kind of hard. Before they got the bath units over there, these guys try to take a bath in the helmet. But so I just rub olive oil all over my head and face right down to my neck. And then that white dust, which is on the road, just accumulates. And I chewed tobacco, which I like anyway. And it's one reason I moved to Issaquah, Washington, so I get out in the country and chew tobacco. But anyway, so then when I took my bath, just had to rub it off. And when I'd go in any place, well, I really looked like a veteran, I'll tell you that. But they sent me back, we were up there, and they sent me back to get 16 90-millimeter guns. We're going to get us some more modern ones so we get up closer. We were already too close, but then they wanted to do it better. And I got down to Florence, and I forgot what I went to Florence for. And so when I came back, well, they were a little upset. And so they packed me in the back of a Jeep, and they took me up and threw me in the nut ward. And I guess evidently that neurocirculatory asthenia is for enlisted men, because now I was a captain. I was an officer. They called me a chronic alcoholic. And they put a guard on me. I thought he was just my friend, but they were watching that none of my friends came in. And so they sent me back to the States, and I'd been locked up about 90 days, I guess, by the time I wound this up. I got to Charleston. I guess they figured, well, now we've had him locked up for 90 days, hadn't had anything to drink, let's try him. So they turned me loose. It was just like letting old Midnight out of Chute 9. I went right out and got drunk. So they locked me back up and sent me to Indianapolis, Indiana. Well, I got drunk in Indianapolis, and now they were checking my record, and they looked, this guy's been in the Army nearly 10 years now. He's got all that longevity, overseas a long time. Look at all the hell he went through. I didn't even know I was overseas the last year. But anyway, they finally sent me out to Camp Carson, Colorado to get rehabilitated. And so I finally got out of the Army. Well, I'm still a wino and a bean picker, but I didn't want to go that route, so I got a job selling punch boards. That was illegal, and it paid good, and so that was my deal. And really, I was a good punch board salesman for the law because I never sold any. I had a good expense account, and my big problem was remembering where I told them I'd be the next week. And I wasn't much of a driver because I never owned a car till after the war, and that's why I always get a kick out of these roadblocks on the holidays. You see, they don't put those up for the winos because they don't own cars. It's for the social drinkers that they put those roadblocks up for. So anyway, I wasn't selling too many boards, and I was called back to Chicago, and I had to go back because this group that I was working for, if you didn't go back, they'd think you were cheating them. And they were make you a little nervous living from then on. And so But if you go back and tell them you've been on a drunk, why, everything will be all right. They'd understand that. And so I got as far as Des Moines, Iowa. And I was laying in a hotel there, sobering up. And the only way that I ever knew to sober up is when you wake up in the morning, you take a drink. Pretty soon you take another, pretty soon another. Pretty soon you get a little buzz, and this lasts for about 30 minutes. And if you got anything to do that day, you better do it during that 30-minute time, because that's all the time you're going to have. And so it was during this 30 minutes that I was looking at the want ads, and it said Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called up, and they came right over. And they said, if you're in the lobby tonight, we'll take you to the meeting. So evidently I was in the lobby because I went to the meeting. And I don't know what happened at the meeting, but I do know one thing. Some guy got up and said, if you don't take the first drink, you'll never get drunk. Amazing thing. I didn't take the first drink for 3 years, and I didn't get drunk. Went to one AA meeting. I thought that was a secret. You don't take the first drink, you'll never get drunk. And so as a result of that, I got in the auction business and got my feet on the ground, and you can move pretty fast right after the war. And so then one day I was out, I still was a loner, and I was out riding around and having lunch, and I saw all these guys having a cocktail. And I began to visualize maybe I was a young executive or something. I was doing pretty good. And so I had a bottle of beer, a little heartburn, you know, really enjoyed it. 2 years of the most stupid drinking I ever did in my life. And I'll tell you why. If I'd been smart, I bought a bunch of booze and got a room, could have wound it up in a week. But instead of that, I drank and tried to handle it. This, to me, is the most miserable existence an alcoholic can have. Fighting to keep from taking that next drink. Getting everything proportioned out. Well, I was flying to Oakland at the time, and according to my schedule, if the plane was on time, I'd be all right. If the plane was late, I went over the hump, and then I had a little trouble. So on my last drunk, the plane was late. And I ended up in a gin mill in Monrovia called the House that Jack built. And evidently I was too drunk to drive. And so I woke up the next morning. I didn't have my car. And I got my half pint that I kept up in the closet to shave on. And so I went up to this bar, and the guy was wiping off a brand new bottle of VO, and I said, you pour them and I'll drink them. So I drank the fifth of VO, and I went down to auction, and as a drunk I couldn't talk. Well, I was the only auctioneer, and an auctioneer that can't talk, you don't have much going for you, I'll tell you that. So finally they got another auctioneer, and they said to me, you better go take a Turkish bath. Well, I'd never had a Turkish bath, and maybe this is the answer. And so, anyway, I went up and I found this place, which I thought was a Turkish bath. There was something wrong with the steam, and they had all my clothes and had me wrapped up in a sheet. And there was a woman that was going to give me a rub down or something, and while I was waiting for the steam, I kept looking at her. And the more I looked at her, the better she looked. So I decided to attack her. Well, this wasn't one of my brighter moves, I'll tell you that. And so they went for the police, and I went for my clothes, and I escaped. And I know that new people, you hear a lot about making amends, but I've been sober now a little over 19 years, and this is one amend I've never fiddled with. And so So anyway, the next day I called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to a meeting, and then they told me about another meeting where a friend of mine, car dealer, was in. And so I went down. He became my sponsor. And they said there are no saints in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said there weren't any saints in Alcoholics Anonymous. I decided I was going to be as good as it was bad. Well, if I could have taken this book, and this book alone, and just followed these principles to the best of my ability, then I'd be able to say that I've had 19 good years in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I studied theology, philosophy, psychology. Now, if you're going to study these, first thing you've got to do is learn the language. So you've got to get yourself a philosophical dictionary. and a theological dictionary, and a psychological dictionary. Then you get up very early in the morning, and in the first sentence you've got to look up a word. So now you look up the word and they give you 10. So now you've looked up 10 words, and now you got to figure out which one this fits into. Well, you learn a lot of words. But I tell you, who you're going to talk to, that's the problem. So if you're going to talk to on theology, you've got to find a theologian. And when you talk to a theologian, you've all read the same books, you don't have much to talk about. So that's why I say, why fiddle around with all this scientific approach? Because they haven't done too well with alcoholics. I saw a program on a national hookup where they got one alcoholic sober for a year on LSD. Now, this is quite a deal. And you look out here and all over the United States, and they've got hundreds of thousands of alcoholics sober, and they're all trying to figure out why. Nobody's ever been able to figure out the reason they're sober. I even know guys that don't like it, been sober 6 months before they realize they've been sober, and then they decide, well, maybe I'll stay this way. It's an amazing thing. So anyway, I went through this for 10 years and went into deep study. Then I came across Albert Schweitzer, and it said the greatest living Christian or greatest living man, so I decided I'd study Schweitzer. I'm going to go to the top. And I got every book that he'd ever written, and some of them were out of print. I had to send to England for them. And I studied it. And then they had a thing in Chicago called, I still wasn't, these guys would go up and look at the sun on the top of the hill. And if I'd do that, go up, I'd sneeze. So I thought, how come I'm working so hard? Where's my pipeline? How come I don't have a direct pipeline? I think this is one of the problems of people trying to get a spiritual experience. What do they think it is, really? I mean, they're looking for something that isn't. So anyway, I went to Chicago to a symposium of scholars for Schweitzer. Paid my own way. I didn't have, guy says, what have you done? They were all doctors or something. And they had the Nobel Prize winners there. And so I interviewed them, unbeknownst to them, one at a time, trying to find out what they knew that I didn't. Well, I found out some of them were good book salesmen. And so I came back and I decided, you see, before this, I figured saints don't smoke. So I quit smoking. I don't know where I got my information, but I figured saints don't swear. I didn't swear for 9 years. The strongest language I used for 9 years was "oh fiddle." And so I came back and decided to start smoking and swearing. And I decided that this is a very simple philosophy. Schweitzer got me back to the AA book. Because, you see, his philosophy and the philosophy of Alcoholics Anonymous, why don't you just take my word for it and forget about buying all those books, are just about, AA is practically Schweitzer's philosophy in action. He says the thing that everybody needs in their life is a way to give of themselves. And that's what AA is all about. You can't get sober and then say, well, my group, I give $1 a week, I'll send them a check for $52, and then I won't go. Because in 3 weeks, you'll liable to be writing the group wanting your money back. And you see, there just doesn't seem to be much way that you can operate in Alcoholics Anonymous without being a part of the fellowship. And it seems to me that a man would miss a lot of life if he didn't have what we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm certainly grateful that I didn't get sober and decide that I had it made and quit coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. Because you see, this is kind of tough for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. I had a bad thing happen in my life about a year ago, and I saw how fast LSD can change a person. So I needed all my friends, and they were there. And I was able to hold together and able to have a degree of happiness with a broken heart. And you see, this to me is what AA is all about. This is when you get that strength when you really need it. And I've had it. And I want to tell you, this AA is just one drunk talking to another drunk. And thank every one of you. God bless you.